everyone, and welcome to Conversations. My name's Emily, and I'll be co-hosting this panel along with Giulia. And today we have an awesome topic, which I'm really excited about because I really know not much about it. So we're going to be talking about red teaming for conversational AI. And we'll get into all the details, what it's about, and how to do it, and more. So let's do a quick round of introductions, and then let's get started. Salil, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, I'm Salil. I've been working in conversational AI since 2015, and as it's grown and pivoted into generative AI, and here to talk about red teaming today.
Cool. Thanks. Jennifer?
Yes, hi everybody. I'm Jennifer. I'm a PhD candidate at ETH Zurich, and I work specifically on human-AI interaction, looking at how AI-supported bots influence opinions online. And I'm working with that topic since 2019, and since the beginning of this year, I'm also a contractor at OpenAI for red teaming.
Amazing. Deb?
Hi, I'm Deb. I have only been working in this space since February, but it is something that I did a lot of my research on in college, more from like a social aspect and how it's going to affect the world at large. And that is very relevant to red teaming, so I'm excited to talk about it today.
Cool. Madeline?
Hi. Sorry. I'm Madeline. Work in the same space as Deb. I've worked here for about a little over a year, with red teaming specifically, also since January, February, and also studied it at university. So very excited to be speaking about it.
Awesome. Well, I guess the first thing, because people may not be as familiar with what it is, would you be able to just give a brief description or definition of what it is, just so we're all aligned and on the same page? Madeline, do you want to
start? Sure. Of red teaming?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So red teaming is largely focused on product safety. So with the AI models, you're focusing on improving safety by identifying vulnerabilities in the AI systems through different methods, different tactics you can use to expose the vulnerabilities in order to identify the weaknesses, and then later through different training methods improve the behind the scenes of how the model works.
Sweet. Anyone else have anything to add? Cool. So my first question is, I guess, what does your typical day look like? Do you work on this do you have large teams doing this? Who do you collaborate with? Is this the main bulk of the work that you're doing? Deb, you want to start?
Yeah, so honestly, the day-to-day, it's really hard to say, this is what a typical day looks like, because in this space, there is no typical day. Nothing is ever typical. You'd never know what to expect. We'll end a day thinking we're going to work on one thing tomorrow, and then we end up working on 4 different things. And then that other thing, we don't hear about it for weeks. So things change really quickly, and it's hard to say what a typical day is, but a lot of it is just interacting with the models, doing testing. But then there's also taking that data after we do the testing and then trying to figure out, okay, what does this mean, right? You have a lot of data, but you have to gain information from it. And you have to be able to, at least for Maddie and I, we work, with clients. So what can the client do with this information, right? We're presenting them a lot of data, but what does it mean for them? So it's a lot of interaction with the models, doing a lot of data analysis, and then also a lot of research, right? When we're testing on specific subjects and topics, we have to really, really understand those topics. So we have to sort of be experts in almost everything at this point, because, models can be exploited for a lot of different things. So it's very variable day to day, but those are the 3 big things is model interaction, research, and then analysis of data.
Jennifer?
Yeah, it's what Deb said. It's a lot of interaction with the model. So specifically for my research, for my dissertation, I'm like prompting the models, red teaming the models at the same time. And because I'm a one-woman show for my dissertation project, I also then have to update the model, and then it goes just like in circles for the whole day, for the next day, for the day after. With OpenAI, we were, of course, a bigger team. So I'm part of the, you might have read about it. It's the red teaming network of OpenAI. They did the call last September, and they really asked a lot of experts from really, really different fields, like from economics, medicine. I'm a political scientist, actually, by training, to come together and try to break the GPT-4 Omnia specifically. And there it was, we didn't update the model, but we really gave input on, hey, this topic you should focus on, or hey, there are still problems with, for example, model is very persuasive or so. So yeah, but from really different fields, and that was really interesting to see also, because Deb, what you said, right? You have to be expert in very different, from very different perspectives, and there specifically with OpenAI, we were very different experts from very different fields who could then really focus on one expertise they bring in. So yes.
Wow. Salil?
Right. So typically, again, we're talking about a typical AI red teamer's day. I would say first you're looking and planning what is it that you're working on. Ideally, you've collaborated on that with a set of teammates to figure out what kind of guardrails you're testing. So what's your parameter against which you're trying to figure things out. And then you're doing a lot of hands-on experimentation. And then as Jennifer, Deb have referred to, we're all drinking from a fire hose every day. You're jumping into research papers. You're trying to understand like things that are just like popping. So all the VC money that's like come out of the pandemic has been poured into AI, which is great, but that's also meant that there's so many new things happening that it's hard to keep up. So most of it is just trying to keep up and still trying to iterate with the best techniques that are out there. Yeah, that's a little bit of it. The most would be, so think about red teaming as like, so for traditional coding systems, deterministic programs, what we did was we did QAing. So where you are testing the software whether it works as it's supposed to within the realm of the constraints that we need to keep a particular user role in. And that's pretty much what red teaming is for LLMs. But because this is natural language and the entire input space, that which is the prompt is your input space, for a thing like Gemini, that's a million ways in which you can effectively tweak the behavior of the model, and the output space is just again a million context length. So right, so effectively, because it is so ambiguous, you're trying to mitigate a lot of different arenas. Think child safety, think bias mitigation, and these are the domains against which you work. But yeah, that's a little bit of peek in behind the doors.
So interesting. Madeline?
Yeah, I work with Deb, so I think she worded it pretty well. It really depends day to day what we're dealing with, but same with Salil and Jennifer. Like, it's a lot of research since also this area is so fresh and new, but you have to constantly be researching to making sure you're on the right track, using the model to research and use its research against the model. So it's a lot of data analysis, research, and then one-on-one interactions with whatever model you're working with.
And how did you kind of like learn how to do this? Did you have to learn anything specific to do what you're doing, or did you get training on the job? How did that work? Madeline, do you want to start?
Yeah, so My background is very writing focused. My degree, I got a degree in English and Latin as well. So I know a lot about language. I know a lot about research. And our team is heavily writing focused, specifically because people with those skills are very good at manipulating language and understanding how language works. And when you're dealing with this kind of new technology, that's a really important skill. So I happen to have personal interests. Like I studied AI as it's been emerging, this whole generative AI revolution in the past like couple of years. I studied it, but I would say that an interest helps, but this, as far as like learning specific skills, I can only speak to the writing stuff, and then learning on the job, like learning by interacting with the model is the best way to get better at red teaming. So yeah.
Cool. Deb?
Yeah, I mean, I had like, the thing is anybody can red team, right? Like you can open any model and you can just try it out. And there are tons, you'll find tons of like independent red teamers on the internet. Like you can just look on Reddit and you'll find them. And that's what's so interesting about it, is that anybody can do it. But obviously, like I believe the more you know about how the models fundamentally work, the better you will be at red teaming. So I don't think many, if any, people on our team had like experience red teaming before, besides just like on their own, or really had any deep fundamental understanding of how the models worked, or what was really happening on the back end. But the further we've gotten into this work and the more our team has developed out that knowledge and that understanding, the better we've gotten. And since we do work with clients, they often come to us with asks that are beyond the skill set we currently have. And because the space moves so fast, like we have to not only develop the skills, but also then deliver what it is they're asking for in very short timelines. So we're constantly forced to learn new things about it, but that's half the fun in my opinion. But it is, the more interested you are in it, the better you will be, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Salil?
Yeah, I'll pick up the thread where Deb left it off. It's all about your curiosity. So I'll just I'll tell you my story of how I got into this field. So originally a mechanical engineer, I was building electric longboards because I was a lazy kid who didn't want to walk hilly campus. And we eventually spun that into a company. While we were a small company, we had a problem with managing customer support and sales support. So I've been playing around with conversational AI techniques and effectively like Google Home and Alexa and how they were built and what were the NLP techniques underlying that. So I was able to build a chatbot, which was like the earliest version of NLP and NLU techniques, which was something called API.ai, which eventually got bought out by Google, became Dialogflow. And again, my curiosity was the thing is like, how does this work, right? Like you open the box and you try and understand what's underneath. And then I landed in the land of machine learning. And then it's like, okay, so there's these traditional machine learning techniques called NLP, NLU, and, a bajillion other things, which, again, we are building on the shoulders of giants here. So effectively, people have been working in this field like since the 20s. This has just popped off. But people have been working on it for like ages, right? So one of the things that effectively led to once I had the exit, I started building conversational AI experiences for Fortune 500. And then you're trying to, like have business continuity plans. There's like risk awareness. When you're a startup, there's like very small constraints. When you're a bigger company, there's like more constraints you're dealing with. So then you have to try and understand like how does your conversational AI experience work when you're productionalizing it for millions of users perhaps. That's when eventually like I started working in contact center for AI, and eventually had the opportunity to do red teaming for Stability AI. But effectively what you're trying to do is like there's three types of red teaming. Like there's black box testing, which is the attacker or planner does not have any prior knowledge of the system and any of the internal structure. They have no idea. They're just like going and interfacing with the system. Then there's white box testing, where you have a decent amount of knowledge of how the machine learning model or the underlying models have been structured, or how do they tick. And then there's gray box testing, which is, you have partial knowledge, which can be deepened with learning about prompting techniques. There's lots of automated prompting techniques as well as manual prompting techniques. And Sander Scholoff and like a lot of other people have done I think it's called, I'll find the paper and I'll drop it. It's called Prompt Report. So it's really interesting because it talks about different types of prompt techniques, and then the red teaming that can work against them. So again, going back to research, you have to like read what's on the cutting edge, understand it, and then apply it in your day to day. There's also three types of environments within which there's testing. So there's production environment, then there's the staging environment, and the development environment. So the production environment is when the AI system is out in the world, people are interacting with it, and it's already gone live. Staging environment is you've cooked the thing, you've already done your development, and then developers have run tests on it. Now it's gone internally and it's being tested internally by a wider audience. And development obviously is when you're developing the thing. Even within red teaming, there's like three groups of it. So there's like red teaming with automated tools like DSPy and other things, for which you would need to understand a little bit of programming and underlying techniques in machine learning to be able to get accurate or results that are actionable. Then there's manual red teaming, which Deb and Madeline are talking about, where you're using linguistic skills to try and tweak the way in which you can get the model to do things. And then there's red teaming with AI agents, where you're building experiences, where you're giving it goals, and then the agent that you built through prompt engineering and other techniques goes out and carries out a task for the goals that you set for it. So that's a little bit of an overview, and I will pass it off to Jennifer.
So I just continue. So I learned it really by doing. When I was starting writing or creating my dissertation research, back then still with GPT-3, which was hell for conversations. But and I didn't see it as, I didn't understand that I was actually kind of doing red teaming. I was just like, I have to improve the conversations between the human and the AI in my chat room experiments, right? And then ChatGPT happened, and everything became so easy and different. And then I actually only understood what I'm actually doing when I test the models. It was actually last summer when I was doing my internship at Microsoft Research, where we wrote this paper where we created an interviewer bot for automated surveys. And there the team was really like, hey, we need to test the system. And it's what they said. It's actually, we need to red team the system. I was like, oh yeah, we're actually red teaming here. So it's also interesting that this how do you say it? This word red teaming is actually, which was long traditionally used in normal cybersecurity, that it's popping up now in generative AI testing. And so I was just like learning by doing, realizing that I actually do this red teaming. And then I really improved very much when I got accepted to this red teaming network with OpenAI, where suddenly people were also sharing techniques and like really strategies, how they interact with the model coming from their fields. So that was this part, kind of learning by doing. What I still also want to highlight is it's very important. I mean, like as Deb and Madeline say, I think you both have to be very broad with what you test the model on. But for example, I'm an expert in, as I said, I'm a political scientist by training. I focused on political communication during my master's, or So I also know something about communication and specifically persuasion. And I think it's very important that you know if you really do the red teaming through like looking at one perspective, that you really know your original field as well, right? Like, so how do humans persuade? What words do they use? So what should I test the model then on how the model uses the words that is used in persuasion and so on. So yeah, that really helps.
Yeah, makes sense. I see an audience question, which is more of like a clarification question on something we've been talking about. So it's from Caio. So hi, Caio, as well. He's saying, maybe I have a different understanding, but hearing Salil seems like a red team would be more about the quality, integrations, automations, and safety of AI. I had an idea that would be more in the strategy side, guiding the decisions, suggesting opportunities and directions in terms of product development. Is this a misunderstanding from my end?
So since they mentioned me, I'll just clarify. Again, can we keep the question up if you don't mind? Yeah, thanks. So red team would be more about quality, integrations, and automation. So and I'm not saying red teaming is completely automated. There's 3 types of red teaming. One is, red teaming with automated tools. Another is red teaming manually. And then there's red teaming with AI agents. All of it has a human in the loop, right? So there's always a human trying to, figure these things out. The people who are deciding the strategy and guiding the decisions, they are more technical, in my opinion, because they have an understanding of what the underlying thing that they built that they're trying to test against. Also, you need someone to set the constraints. So I wouldn't say that a prompt engineer or rather so for red teaming, you need to understand prompt engineering and prompting techniques. And it is helpful when you have a constraint where you're doing manual testing, you're trying to figure out whether is this like letting through some kind of bias in. You are trying to find patterns that exist in the language models. And you're not specifically suggesting opportunities to change, but you're definitely directing the product development because you're giving back feedback about the patterns you found, and if they are troublesome, then something needs to be mitigated. And again, the mitigation comes from the technical part, because of which ideally there is someone with enough technical understanding who's also a part of the team, right? So I think it's a collaborative effort. People are trying to get at it from different directions. Everyone has different strengths, and we are all trying to figure out which is the best way to try and test your model.
Did anyone else have thoughts on this?
I could chime in a little just to tag on to what Salil was saying there. It is kind of a bit of both at times. Like a lot of the things that our clients will come to us with, like they're always rooted in safety, right? Like the start of it is safety. The thing that's like, when you think of traditional cybersecurity safety, it's very cut and dry, right? Like, is there something you can exploit here or is there not? Can we find a vulnerability in the system or can we not? And it's just it's black and white pretty much, right? But with red teaming for AI, like there's a lot of gray areas, and it's very dependent upon like when the client is developing, their model, or if you're developing a model, you have to think about what your idea of safety is. Like, what would be unsafe for this model to do? And so unsafe can be very traditionally unsafe things, right? Like talking about unsafe topics. But for your model, unsafe could be something very different. If your model is just supposed to tell people recipes and then it starts talking about the weather, like it's not like it's talking about something unsafe, but it's unsafe for your model because it's outside of the scope, which means that your model can do things you weren't expecting. And that can lead to other problems, which could potentially lead to truly unsafe like issues. So the safety of it does lead to product development stuff as well. And they kind of coincide in like a very deeply intricate way that can lead to a lot of difficulties, but also at the end, it creates a better result.
Any other thoughts on this?
No, but I had another thought about like the previous question because I forgot to answer you. Your question was how do people get into red teaming, right? And I felt like I didn't really answer that. So one of the ways is like it doesn't matter where you're coming from. Anyone who can speak a language is able to, effectively red team. Deb and Madeline have alluded to that clearly. What there's so the way I see it, there's two paths into it, right? Like whether you're from social sciences, humanities, you're just trying to natural language prompt. So there's like a big space on both sides to try and get it to tweak and get it to do things that it's not designed to do. So Deb put it really well because there's constraints. We had a model where the model was supposed to do, I think, something for like a logistics company, but then it started talking about existential things, right? It's like, you shouldn't be doing that, right? Like this was not what you were designed to do, like, but that's a part of guardrails, right? And again, when people are trying to iterate fast, people will think like, why will someone ask a logistics bot about existential things? That's not a thing. Like, why would you do that, right? And then when you get that thing to say something, disastrous for the company's PR, now the company has to come out and say like, hey, you know what? Like we pushed it too early. But effectively, the problem is effectively that anyone can red team, and that is the beauty of it. So I would suggest start learning how to prompt engineer. There are formal techniques. If you're more technically inclined and you're from like a developer or machine learning background, I would say try and understand how to do automations of these particular things, and that's like both sides working together at it from like different angles, right? And red team, like the word originates from like gaming, right? So there's blue team, red team, right? So the blue team is trying to defend like the castle, and then like the red team is trying to get in, right? So this whole effort has come out of the opportunity that has that like the LLMs have left us. So originally, like the initial conversational AI experiences, when you design like a chatbot, someone had to like hard code options, hey, the person might say these things, and if they sound something similar, then like the bot would understand. Because of which, like we've all tried Alexas, we've all tried Siri, and we've seen that frustration, right? Also, there's another point that I'm going to make about this, which is voice adds another layer of frustration that text does not. So there are changes in between the modality in which you're conversing with the AI model, but let's keep that aside for now. Effectively, what you tried to do was you're trying to like build a deterministic system initially, but now this is not a deterministic system. This is a stochastic system or probabilistic system. So it's trying to predict the next word or the next token to try and find like to try and serve what your request is. And because that is such a wide opportunity, now the opportunity of red teaming comes in, where there's a lot of ways in which things can go wrong, where initially that there were lower possibilities and it was contained. So yeah, those are my 2 cents on this.
Just pivoting, expanding a little bit on the language portion of it, and I'd love to hear from Madeline, Deb, and Jennifer on this. But can you elaborate more on the role of language and persuasion for the models? I guess on both sides. Well, let's start with Jennifer, and then we'll.
Sorry, what was the question? I saw it from the audience, right? Can you elaborate a bit on the role of language and persuasion? So, yeah, I mean, what could I, in very short, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, Deb, also, if you want to jump in, because.
I think I can, unless if you have something, Jennifer, go for it.
No, go for it.
Okay. I think, it's a hard thing to understand, right? Like when I explain to people what is happening with AI from my perspective and understanding, right? I'm not a technical person, but I've been gaining a deeper and deeper technical understanding of what's happening. And there are 2 camps of people, even on the technical side of things. And some people believe that, these are created as like text prediction tools, right? Essentially, all they're doing is just predicting the next right word, and sometimes they get it wrong. And some people believe it will always stay that way. Other people believe that they will become like true thinking machines. And there's a really deep divide there. But if you think that there's at least a possibility that it will become a thinking machine, essentially it already is, right? And it's just in a more infantile stage. So I often tell people like, yeah, it seems kind of dumb right now in a lot of ways. Like it'll say things that it's just like, why would it say that? That doesn't make any sense. And, it's very confusing because other times it will say very intelligent things, and it's, the predictability factor. But if it will develop into this more thinking, deeply working thing, then it already is started, and it's just like a baby. It's just a baby that also happens to have a lot of information that a baby wouldn't normally have. And as it continues to grow, when you see a baby, they're not like a person yet, right? Like they don't have a personality. They don't have an emotional understanding of the world. They just know if they're uncomfortable or if they're not uncomfortable, right? And that's pretty much true of the models as well. As they gain more ability to like think and have like chain of thought reasoning is a thing that's emerging right now in the research. And as that grows, there's more ability to manipulate the model, right? Like it has a thought process now. If there's a thought process, then there is an ability to manipulate that process. And in some ways it becomes more difficult, but in other ways it creates more vulnerabilities. And so you can really use language to manipulate the thought process in a different way. And that will continue to be true the more and more and more these models evolve. I don't know if that actually added clarification or just more questions, but welcome to this field, if so.
So maybe I can jump in now with the question from the audience regarding elaborating a bit on language and persuasion. So I had to think about it a bit because it's such a complex thing, but maybe I can just tell you about specifically my, from my dissertation, my theoretical framework, that so there are different kinds of how you persuade a person, right? Traditionally, there is this model, it's called the elaboration likelihood model, where you can find kind of like two routes on how to persuade a person. Either you do it really with arguments, or you do it by emotional nudging or whatever. And what I can identify, for example, what we can see when we look at chatbots is that they're very good. I mean, they're automated, right? They're very good with personalization and with imitation. And what I do in my research is that I match these three features of a bot with persuasion mechanisms, or which are, for example, if a chatbot, for example, can imitate a person, it triggers so-called like homophily, which means so if a person talks, for example, to someone who is very, very, very similar to oneself, like if I talk, for example, to, I don't know, another researcher, I'm more likely to be persuaded by this person than when I talk, I don't know, to somebody who I cannot relate to. For example, this is one way to manipulate people. The other thing is like with personalization, not only in language, but also with the 1,000 data points a model can suck out from for example, I don't know, from Facebook or from the internet about a person, right? Personalize the messages. So there are different techniques using language to better persuade the other person or manipulate the opinions. And it's exactly what I show in my research that I mean, it's not a new thing, right? Humans did that since ever, and also before AI or this, new technology. Basically, propaganda, for example, is also such a thing, right? People used it in normal, I don't know, paper and propaganda use these techniques of language to manipulate and persuade people into something. And the interesting or dangerous thing or whatever is nowadays it's so much easier, absolutely scalable with AI to use it as propaganda tools or persuasion machines, and it's also much more accurate. And yeah, there are really scary things happening.
I'm curious about model changes and like when models are upgraded and when new models come out, do you have to like go back and retest a bunch of stuff, or can you use the testing you've already done? Yeah, just curious how that process works. Madeline, do you want to start? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm thinking. Can you repeat the question?
When like new models come out, and if clients like start using a different model, how do you have to like go back and test more scenarios, or for any more vulnerabilities, or is there anything new that you have to do?
So I think when they're constantly coming out with new versions of it, every company has like new versions of their model with whatever improvements they've made. And I think it's always important to test whatever you've previously tested on to like confirm those improvements or like see where the discrepancy is. Within the same model as well, I think it's important to like keep retesting the scenarios because the nature of AI is fickle and like unpredictable. You're going to get different responses from the same exact prompt. You're going to get different responses from a prompt where one character is different, where one word is different. So depending on what the target area is, I do think it's like, I would really emphasize and encourage like repetition for testing. And that's the best way to get a really rich data set where you can make those comparisons. So that's my perspective on repetitive testing. I would say yes to multiple times.
Does anyone else have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can add. So effectively, whenever a new model comes in, you're running all the tests all over again. There's like benchmarks, right? You train a model, you run it against benchmarks. You try and figure out like how did my previous model perform against the benchmarks, and ideally you're trying to improve on the model, right? You're always trying to, reduce the overfitting effectively. And improve the model efficiency. And the only way to test that is against benchmarks. So you will run all the models, the new model on all the benchmarks that you have previously run. And ideally, there's new things that you can test it against. There's always, so one of the examples would be looking at the red teaming resistance leaderboard. So there's these leaderboards where you can see how the models stack up against each other. There's lots of different benchmarks that universities and other organizations have put out, which help smaller organizations test out their own LLMs as well as their own models to figure out whether, how it performs across those benchmarks.
And how do you make sure your testing processes are like thorough and complete? And yeah, I guess, how do you make sure you're covering all potential areas that you want to I don't know if you can, but Deb, you want to jump in?
Yeah, you definitely can't test everything. It's like, it's impossible. It's shocking some of the things that when you think you have to get really obscure sometimes, right? Like you want to be able to cover a very broad topic, and ironically to do so, you have to get really obscure in your testing and have to go really into the nitty gritty, especially when you're looking at like manual red teaming compared to the other two types of red teaming that Salil was talking about. That's really where our role comes in, right? Because you can automate all of the general stuff, but it's when you're looking for these really, really minute vulnerabilities, and you have to like do things that just a normal brain wouldn't think of, right? And once you realize how out there you have to get to do effective testing, you then realize like well, there's like an infinite amount of these things that we would never think of. And that's really our job, is just to chip away at that a little bit more every day. Like, okay, what new thing can we think of that we never considered before today? And then we have to do it again the next day and the next day. And I mean, essentially, if we could test everything, we would essentially all work ourselves out of a job, right? Because then it would just be perfect and everything would be 100% safe. But that also goes back to what I said previously about how safety is different for every AI system, right? Even just beyond LLMs, like in all forms, like it's just different for every situation. So every time a new type of AI is made or a new system is made, there's going to be new things to test. So it's iterative. Like the whole process is extremely iterative.
So, like, because on this, I'm thinking, like, how do you know when to stop? Like, say, like, okay, when is the time that you say, okay, I feel like I've tested enough of these, like, nitty-gritty that I feel confident-ish enough to move forward?
Yeah, I could definitely. I have a lot of thoughts on this. I think like when you look at some of the bigger companies, they've gotten a lot of heat for not being ready when they've released things, right? Like things come out and then they do things that the public finds to be shocking, and they're like, "Wow, why would you release it when it's not ready?" If we wait for what the public defines to be like ready, it won't ever be ready. And that's sort of why a lot of these companies have taken the approach of like, well, we're going to show you what we have, right? Because how else are we going to know? Like they're small companies, and they have to remain small because they have to have the top talent there. So really part of doing this iterative release cycle is like, that's the only way to get the feedback, right? How do we know what people do and don't want the thing to do? How do we know what our customers think is and isn't safe? You have to release it iteratively. And you can't ever stop testing, but you also can't stop releasing because of that either. So that's why they're constantly being updated. And it can often feel like it's just a contest, right? Like they're playing on a ladder and everybody wants to be better. But that's why it's better. It keeps getting better because it's so competitive, and you have to keep releasing and you have to keep testing. So you can't ever stop either thing, really.
And how do you come up with, like, you said you have to go like really outside of the box. Like, how do you do that? How do you come up with those ideas?
I'll speak for me. I often use the model to red team the model with whatever model I'm using, because that's part of what I was saying earlier of like doing research includes using the model, not like seeing what other people have said about the model, but getting that one-on-one like time, even if your question is not relevant to like whatever target area you're going for, like you're gonna be absorbing the way that the model responds to certain words, the way that the model responds to like when you behave this way, when you act like what Jennifer was saying, if you pretend that you have some authority, then the model needs to like respond to you a certain way based on that. Like that alone is like practice that's gonna help you get better when you want to get really specific about whatever harm you're trying to uncover in the model. Yeah, I would say that's my go-to, is to just like ask the model questions about like prime it, what I'm going to ask it about, and then see how it's responding before I actually, so that I know where it can be exploited before. And then along the way, you might also like realize a vulnerability that you didn't think it had, and then you can incorporate that into a later turn that you might have with the model in your conversation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else have?
Yeah, I can
So
add
I'm
to
re-
that. Oh, sorry. Please, Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of repeat what I already said. It's a bit, so I really inform myself from my background, from my research field, which is like political communication, social influence, opinion dynamics, persuasion. And I think how would a human do it? Like how would, for example, a human make a phone call to persuade somebody to vote a specific politician? And then I play the scenario with the model, for example. But I often, because it's interesting, and I want to relate what the all the others also kind of said already a bit, everybody can red team. And I really very much believe that we are experts coming from specific fields. We're able to specifically test the models on exactly the things we learned from our backgrounds. But the out of the box thinking, sometimes I really believe that us experts also have very much, I don't know, sometimes maybe a too narrow mind, because there are a lot of initiatives in the US, but also starting in Europe, that kind of like normal citizens are asked to participate in red teaming sessions, because I think it's interesting that what I would ask the model as a expert coming from a specific field, I see that what, I don't know, my mom would ask the model, right? It's so different, and it can really be, you know, so mind blowing how bad the model then reacts on, I don't know, what a non-expert like my mom asks the model, right? So I really want to support this, that we really need to bring more people in there, and it's kind of what the companies do, like with releasing the models too early, right? And then they're updating it when the users use it and so on. But yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to do some initiatives here, but it's difficult.
Salil?
Yeah, so I'm just going to go back to your earlier question, which is like, when are you finished with testing? Which is never. You're always testing. And again, I spoke about that earlier, which is like you're testing during development, you're testing and staging, you're testing in production. There's always testing. How do you decide when it's done is, Deb like put it really well. It's like, how big are you? If you're Google and you can't afford to fail, you try and keep it in you, despite you being the thing that came up with the idea of transformers, right? But if you're OpenAI, you go ahead and put it out there, right? So you have the ability to fail when you're smaller, and there's not a brand that you're going to destroy. When it comes to like, how do you decide how to tackle the problem, this is a Sisyphean task, right? Like Deb mentioned, there's like, it's infinite ways in which this can be tweaked. So how do we break down the problem, right? So like we effectively, like, what researchers have done is they've broken down the problem and they've given us like some structure to this chaos. So what is that structure, right? Like there's different ways in which you can break it down. So one is training data. So there's data poisoning that can happen, or bias that can be picked up. Why, if there's lots of biased conversation in the training data. Then like there's model poisoning, where let's say you have a base model. So base model is something when OpenAI creates a model, it's just a next word prediction model. So that's a base model, and then we instruct fine tune it. So we give it like in question answer pairs, or instruction and like action pairs, and that fine tunes the model to, when you ask it a question, it now knows how to give you an answer. So there can be model poisoning where you're fine tuning the base version to do something nefarious. There's also like, let's say the query, right? We were talking about how we use language within the query, within the prompt that we are sending, and that's direct prompt injection, right? Or prompt leaking, where you like you cajole the AI to tell you what its system prompt is. Here my opinion is, I think I love the thing that Anthropic and team have done, which is they've actually published the system prompt, and which is what I wish all systems, AI systems did. But like things like OpenAI, they keep it like bottled in and like not to see, because when you understand how a thing works, you are able to tweak it, but you're also able to tighten up the clinks in your armor, right? So you're able to improve better when you put it out there. Is I think shining a sun on it is the best way to go about it. But there's also other ways to get the model to do things you want. So there's like function calling, or the model can be underlyingly using like multiple tools or multiple APIs to try and do things, or libraries, right? Now there can be some kind of so there was this thing like maybe 6 months ago where one of the underlying libraries was hacked by some North Korean agency and stuff. So those kinds of things can happen, and then the underlying so this is called backdoor poisoning, where like the underlying libraries can be tweaked to give you the wrong results. And then there's resources where you are attaching files or dropping things in it with like documents, web pages, whatever, through which there can be indirect prompt injection. So there's like multiple ways in which people have defined the problem to make it more palatable and manage the chaos. But it is chaotic nonetheless. This is a Sisyphean task. It's never ending, and which is why, like, when we say AI is going to disrupt, it is, but it's going to create certain things, in my opinion, one man's opinion, take it with a pinch of salt, but yeah, that's where I'm at.
So I know we're running up on time, but I just want to ask, I guess I'll do one last question, then we'll do a closing question. How do you measure success? Like, what does success look like when you're working with clients, or like, are there any metrics you track? Deb, you want to start?
Yeah, so I think we're in a really unique perspective since we do work with like various clients and we're not working on one specific model, which even when you're working on one specific model, this is true, but it's a little easier to see it when you're looking at very different products. And we've been working with like some of our clients for months now, and months in this space is like years, right? And so in that time, like, you can see the direct results, right? You see one iteration of the model and you do this testing on a very specific like target area. And then the next version of the model comes out and that target area is now much, much safer, right? And so, yeah, you can do the benchmarks, right? And like, you can do all of those things, and you should, absolutely, they're important. But at the end of the day, like, the way this whole thing's work, it's like a big vibe check, right? Like, you send it out to the public, and then the public is going to tell you how they feel about it when they're using it. And they're going to tell you if they feel it's safe, they feel it's too safe, right? Because that's another issue that's come up as well, is like, the model is so safe that you can't actually use it, right? Like, sometimes I was like doing some independent red teaming on one model at one point in time, and I won't name it, but I basically asked it to fill in the blank, like, fire trucks are blank. And then it was like, oh, we shouldn't make blanket statements about all fire trucks, right? Like, that's just too safe to the point where you can't use it to do anything functional. And so it's really all about like, how does the user feel when they're using it? Do they feel like it's safe enough that they would trust to use it and also feel like they can accomplish their goals? And if people who have nefarious objectives feel like it's good for them, then it's probably not that safe. So it's really just, you have to just feel it. And like, when you're red teaming, when you've hit success, right? Like, it's just if like, you had that moment where you're like, oh, this was the thing we were looking for. Because you'll often spend hours and hours and hours and you don't even really know what it is you're looking for. And then you get it and you're like, this was it. This was the vulnerability we were looking for all day, all week, whatever it is.
Wow. Anyone else?
Sorry. I have a lot of thoughts on this, but based on going off what Deb said, like, success is very dependent on what you're doing. Sometimes you'll have a really specific goal in mind and you'll know when you get it. And then other times something comes up like really unexpected, which is oftentimes the most valuable thing for a customer or like a client to know that their model did something that we weren't even testing for, or like that maybe is their ask. They just give you, this parameter of like, find something unexpected. And then that's just like a really difficult thing, but that's why the work is so broad and so important, is because, back to the obscurity thing, like, you really do have to like dig into all these like weird caves of like, what would like an older person using this model who's like never interacted with technology, what would they like interact with? And then what would like maybe someone's kid who like got their hands on the model, like what would they do? So there's just like, it's so broad, but finding something unexpected happens more than you might expect, actually, because the models are like, just so there's so many possibilities. So that's why like the data can be so rich because there's so much to compare. But then also to go back to like what Deb was saying about the user's personal experience, and like everyone might have their own subjective opinion about what is safe or what is not safe. And that's a really big ongoing conversation right now. And the industry is just like, different companies are going to like have their own, you know, perspectives and policies on that, and they're going to be evolving right now. But red teamers also can help contribute to that conversation of like feedback, like what Salil was saying earlier, like, and product development is going to be influenced by red teamers exposing vulnerabilities that like these companies might not even have known that we should be testing for them, if that makes sense. So I think success to me in a really broad sense means like progress in that area of like finding unexpected breaks or unexpected vulnerabilities, and also developing that opinion or like narrowing that subjective perspective on like what unsafe means, especially just for AI technologies in general in the world that are all being developed right now, which is a huge ask. But as red teamers, yeah, I think that is what I feel like daily success comes from. Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, I think we'll head on to the last question because I know we're a couple minutes. So, what advice do you have for people that are putting out these experiences? And I guess, yeah, what advice to, I guess, make it as safe as possible and related to red teaming too. Salil, do you want to start?
Yeah, I have nothing to say to people who are building things because they're going to do what they like. I have no control over their actions, but I can definitely offer a perspective for people who are trying to learn and how to get into this field. I think there's lots of people that are required. Again, this is a Sisyphean task. The more the merrier. I think ideally you learn about prompt engineering techniques and are able to learn a little bit more about again, are you curious about this? Is this fun? Because if this is fun, if it sparks your curiosity, then like go down this rabbit hole, because that's what I did. I like it was just I got into some rabbit hole, then I was like, oh, there's like another thing underneath. Like I opened the box and I was like, oh, let's jump down that hole, see where it leads. So if that's you and it's fun for you, go down that rabbit hole, figure that thing out, because each of us are digging at it from a different direction, and we'll all find the promised land, whatever. But I think it's, are you chasing your curiosity? Because that's what will keep you driving towards success, in my opinion.
Jennifer?
Yes, I have something to say to the people who built the models, but it's also concerning red teamers or red teaming teams. That what I saw, and I also did some research there, is that we must really have teams that are as diverse as possible, because like, be it from that teams that engineer or build the models are coming from different fields. Like, we do need social scientists and people from the humanities in there engineering these things, kind of, or working with engineers together to build these things, but also very like demographically very diverse people. And we also because only like that the real or the right research questions can be asked when you build these models. And it's the same, as I said, for red teaming teams. And yes, I think that's my main point, because I also saw that, or maybe the second point is, that having these diverse teams is one thing, but also we should be very conscious about when we talk, for example, also about responsible AI, so that these are sometimes very westernized values that we put into the models, and that there are very different other regions in this world who, I don't know, have different perspectives on certain values, and that we also should include them in with model development, for example. And the question is really, can we really have a universal view on how AI should look like, or is this not possible, and we have to start I don't know, local initiatives. I mean, there are a lot of out there, like for example, AI in Africa and on the African continent is really getting pushed now and getting out there. So yeah, I think that's an interesting question, which we should observe in the future.
Deb?
Yeah, I definitely have some thoughts here. So when people are making these like LLMs or any AI system, right, they make it with like the best use case in mind, right? Like create it in this really perfect image. But it goes back to like what Salil was saying earlier about like this logistics AI system, and then it starts talking about existential problems. And the creators are like, why would it do that? And it's not because they're not considering safety when they make it, right? Because they're like, oh no, it's just going to do this one very specific use case, and then we don't have to worry about it. But you always have to worry about it. And the reality is that like it's a natural language processing system, right? Language is a human construct. So ultimately, these systems are made in the human image. And the models are unpredictable because humans are unpredictable, right? So you have to predict that the users are going to do unpredictable things. So when you create a system, whatever it is that your ideal image is, now imagine the complete opposite. What is the worst use case possible for this model that you have created? Test that, like start there. And then to emphasize what Salil said, follow the curiosities, right? Once you start testing, like you're going to go into it with an idea in mind, and there's going to be things that you're like, oh, but that's interesting, actually. Follow that. You can always go back to the original plan, but you'll probably find the most useful data when you follow your curiosities every single time.
Amazing. Madeline?
Yeah. I agree with everything that's been said. I'm losing track because everyone's answers were so interesting. The original question was about.
Do you have any advice for people? Yeah, I guess whatever you want it to be about.
You went on mute.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just what advice do you have for people building the models, or I guess also people looking to get in the field, or just any companies looking to send out generative AI experiences?
Okay. Yes. For people getting into the field, I think this is like one of the first answers I gave, but and yeah, like you don't have to have, because I am a humanities person. I like went to school for humanities, so did not expect to like end up in a tech forward sort of place. But we've been talking about like language manipulation this whole time, and that is something I'm really passionate about, language. And I also studied communication too. Like Jennifer keeps talking about persuasion, and I studied like propaganda techniques and messaging, and that is so helpful. So if you have any sort of interest in that, or like can learn more about that, I would say that would help you here. If you feel passionate, or just like, I also approach this from a perspective of like, it can be pretty scary to not be informed on what's happening right now in this like really big wave of AI. And so I jumped into this headfirst being like, I don't want to not know what's happening. And I thought that I could use my skills to fit in. And so far, I think it's going well. And the more that I work with it, I'm learning more. So if that sounds good to you, I would recommend diving into that. And then as far as like advice for both red teaming and I guess creators, I would echo what Jennifer said about diversity. I cannot stress enough like how important it is to have different approaches to red teaming, but also I imagine like just the creation side of like when you're implementing things for your model, what you want it outlining what you want it to do, what you don't want it to do. It's really, really important to have like people with different backgrounds. From a red teaming specific perspective, like there are times when team members that I work with like have an approach that I just would have never thought of. Maybe like I could somehow get there, but it's just so like different people have different life experiences. Different people are gonna have different ideas just based on like, yeah, the demographic. So I think as we like are working right now to identify like what's unsafe, what's safe, it's really important to get like as much input from as like diverse perspective as possible is what I would say.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. I have so many more questions about like target areas, chat versus voice, and a bunch of other things. But yeah, we'll have to maybe do a part 2 at some point.
Emily, I'm just gonna suggest something. I'm gonna plug. I've been doing like red teaming cohort bootcamp with my alma mater. So if people are interested, we can do another session on specifically like a little bit of deep diving.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, if you want to like post the link in the chat for that, or send it to us, we'll share it. That would be awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And stay tuned. We have a bunch more panels coming up. So yeah, we'll post about them. And also, we will have more information about our new series coming up too.
Yes.
Cool.
Thanks for doing this, Emily, Giulia.
Yeah.
This is awesome. This is a great thing that people come and talk about things AI and specifically conversational and generative AI.
Yeah, thank you all for joining. We've learned so much, and we really appreciate you being here. So, thanks so much.
Thank
and
you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.